How's it going, Guardians? Shifty here, and today the new dungeon releases. Now if you don't want any spoilers for the new dungeon, I would click off the video right now. Alright, so the new dungeon is going to be called Duality. Unfortunately, I won't be able to get to play it until Sunday, but I do have some information for you today. In this video, I'm going to preview the loot you can earn and go over the triumphs associated with this dungeon. Based on what I've seen, I'm a bit mixed on the loot so far. I think some of the new weapons look incredible. The armor I'm not such a fan of, but we'll get into that in just a bit. But before I do, if you end up enjoying today's video, make sure to hit that like button, and if you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe as well. Alright, so again, there's going to be spoilers in this video. In this section, I'm going to start by going over most of the loot, including the weapons. Then towards the end of this section, I'm going to show you each armor set. Then after we're all done talking about the loot, I'm going to go over the associated triumphs for this particular dungeon. So let's get started on the weapons. First of all, there's two reprised Season of Opulence weapons. The first one being is the fixed odds machine gun, and this is a high impact frame, so not the most popular archetype, but it should be pretty fun to earn. Based on some info on Light GG, this is going to have some fun perks like Killing Tally and Incandescent. The loot pool for the dungeon also includes the reprised Epicurean fusion rifle, which is a precision frame fusion. Now for the most part, the perk pool for this fusion rifle is pretty standard fare for fusions. There are a couple of new perk options available, but nothing that's mind-blowing. Now finally, we get to move on to the new weapons specifically for this dungeon. Now unfortunately, as of making this video, I can't view these new weapons on Light GG, so I have no idea what other perk options are going to be available. Now let's start off by looking at the grenade launcher Lingering Dread. Now the aesthetic here is pretty excellent. I think this is a really cool looking weapon, and I'm excited to get my hands on it personally. Overall, the perk options that are shown here in the collections are pretty good together. It also has a new origin trait called Bitter Spite. While this weapon is equipped, taking damage accelerates its next reload. Taking more damage increases the effect. Now this is a stasis grenade launcher, so it's going to go in that kinetic slot, and it's also a lightweight frame. Next up is one of my favorite archetypes in the entire game. We have a high impact frame pulse rifle called New Purpose, again with that really cool looking aesthetic. Now the perk options that are viewable here aren't all that bad, but I'm really excited to look at the remaining perk pool for this weapon. Again, it's another stasis weapon, so it's going to go in that kinetic slot. I'm really excited to see if this is going to compete with something like the Messenger. Next up, we have a brand new archetype for linear fusion rifles. Here we have the Storm Chaser Arc Linear Fusion, and you can see it's an aggressive frame, and it says it fires a 3-round burst. This is going to be really interesting to try out, a 3-round burst linear fusion rifle. I'm excited to see how something like this plays. Overall, the perks that I see here don't stand out all that much, but I really am excited to see what sort of perks can roll on this new 3-round burst linear fusion rifle. Again, this follows the aesthetic of the grenade launcher and the pulse rifle, so I'm really loving it. Next up is the final legendary weapon that you can earn from the Duality dungeon. Here we have the Unforgiven Void Submachine Gun. I'm interested to see how this one plays, considering it's another Void Submachine Gun. We'll see how it compares to something like Shayura's Wrath or the Title. However, both of those weapons are no longer obtainable, so maybe this one is going to stand out, and it could especially stand out if it has really good perk options. The final weapon that is available from the dungeon is the new exotic sword Heartshadow. Now as far as I'm aware, there's no quest associated with this, and it's going to be a random drop, but I'll get into that in just a moment. The intrinsic trait here is called Exhumation. Heavy attacks made with full sword energy turn you invisible and fire exploding void projectiles. Then you have the additional Shot in the Dark trait. Remaining invisible grants this weapon increased damage for a brief duration. Hitting a target with this weapon's projectiles while Shot in the Dark is active also weakens them. So this is going to be a really interesting sword. It does have a catalyst that will also come from the dungeon, but I'm excited to see what kind of invisible plays can be done with this sword in PvE. Obviously, since it's a heavy sword, you won't see it too often in PvP, but I'm sure someone will find a use for it there as well. Next up, let's go over the cosmetics before I get into the armor sets for each class. So the dungeon does have an exotic ship available called Mandate of Strength, and it's basically a Hake inspired ship. It doesn't look too impressive to me, but I'm sure someone out there likes the look of this ship. There's also going to be a new emblem available called the Deepest Truth. I assume you get this from simply completing the dungeon. There's actually going to be another emblem available as well, but we'll go over that when I get to the triumphs. Before I get to those triumphs, I'm going to show you the armor set for each class real quick. Alright, so now that we've gone over the loot for the dungeon, let's go over the associated triumphs. Alright, so the first one is called Thought Stealer, and it requires you to complete the Duality dungeon. It rewards you with that emblem I showed you earlier. The next one is called Flawless Thought Stealer, and this requires you to complete all encounters in Duality without dying. As you can see, the reward here is increases the Heartshadow drop rate. That's why I think it's going to be a random drop from this dungeon, because there are triumphs associated with increasing the drop rate for that exotic sword. Of course, naturally, we're going to have a solo Thought Stealer, complete all encounters in the Duality dungeon solo. This also increases that Heartshadow drop rate. As with all dungeons, we have a triumph called Perfected Thought Stealer, complete all encounters in the Duality dungeon solo without dying. You know, based on my channel's history, that I'm definitely going to be going for this. As you can see here, this also increases the Heartshadow drop rate and awards you with an additional emblem, as you can see right there. One thing I'm interested to see here is it specifically says complete all encounters in the Duality dungeon solo without dying. I wonder if it has to be all in one completion of the dungeon, or if you can load out and just load back in for each individual encounter. Based on previous dungeons, I'm assuming you're going to have to do it in one complete run of the dungeon. Next up, United in Secrecy requires you to complete all of the encounters with a full fire team of clanmates. Also, we have Arc Fire Team completion, completing all encounters on Arc subclasses, completing all encounters on Solar subclasses, Void subclasses. Then we have United in Class, which requires you to complete all encounters of the dungeon with a full fire team of the same class. We all know there's going to be a master difficulty of this dungeon, so we have a Master Thought Stealer Triumph, complete the Duality dungeon on master difficulty. Here is where you get that Mandate of Strength ship, and you also get an increased Heartshadow drop rate from this one as well. There are two more triumphs for the Duality dungeon. The next one is called Mind Heist, steal Callus's repressed memories. As you can see, there's a whole list here of repressed memories that you can collect throughout the dungeon. This also increases the Heartshadow drop rate. And the final triumph for the dungeon is called Assassin's Lament, and this requires you to earn the exotic sword Heartshadow. So while I'm not able to jump into the dungeon personally today, I hope this video gave you some insight into the loot you can earn, as well as the triumphs that are associated with the dungeon. Also, I've heard rumors out there that there's a seal associated with the dungeon that's not yet visible. And based on some of these triumphs, that makes a lot of sense considering you have the Solar Fire Team completion, Void Fire Team completion, Arc Fire Team completion, and United in Class. So if there is a seal available, I'm interested to see what title is associated with it. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, remember to like and subscribe. I just want to thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.